Welcome back to Figured Out by 25, a conversation about letting go of unmet expectations and accepting what is. It's Erin.
And it's Jazmin.
And welcome back to another episode of the pod. Yeah. That's all I got. That's all I got today. Y'all, it's been a long day.
That it has.
Tired.
That we are.
But we're here for you. We're here for you.
Yeah.
Our wonderful listeners, viewers, fellow podcast tune-inners. We're here for you.
Cool.
And today's episode is going to be one that hopefully we can be here for you for as well. As we are all going on journeys in our adulthood. We all go on different journeys. And I think this was an episode that Jazmin really had it on her heart to share, just for her adulthood journey, and something that she had to experience, something that she feels like needs to be discussed, and I agree should be discussed, as walking with her on a journey, like walking with her on this journey a little bit as it happened, us kind of becoming friends during this season, and her walking into a new season of marriage and also dealing with some hardships. And so, as we said about this podcast before, we want to be able to create the safe spaces for us to be able to have hard conversations. And so, if you're ready, as you'll ever be.
Probably as I'll ever be. I can't promise that there won't be tears.
Yeah. We got tissue on standby.
We do have tissue on standby. But as Erin said, I feel like this is an important conversation because I think as young adults, this is something that's not discussed a lot.
Right.
It's kind of like inevitable. You know, the loss and grieving is inevitable, but you're never really prepared for it.
Yeah. So as she said, the title of today's episode is going to be Adulthood and Loss. So mainly going to be her sharing her story. I just think that she was, like I said, what she experienced as a young adult, as, like I said, a newlywed, and trying to navigate all those things. And so I'll probably ask some questions along the way. If there's anything too sensitive, let me know. You can give me a look like, no.
That's you. That's not me. I'm an open book. I'm going to cry my way through it and still explain it.
But I'll ask some questions along the way. I have a bit of things that I may be able to contribute to the conversation. But yours is way more recent. And so, and it's mainly, like we said, in her adulthood journey. So there may be some things that I share, but mainly it'll be her time to be able to really talk about this topic. Like
it's my time to shine.
Your time to shine.
This is my moment.
This is your moment.
On the loss episode.
Yes, on the adulthood and loss episode. You gotta laugh, you know. You gotta laugh and keep from crying. So that's what I like about her. She's very, when she's sad. Like, she's sad. But then she has her moments where, you know, she can laugh through it. And she may be still sad, but she's going to find joy in it. So, so we're excited to have y'all here again. And we're ready to talk about this. So I guess I can just ask, kind of, can you describe the journey that you were on? Like I said, you know, about to be a new wife. You had just also accepted a new position. You're getting the hang of that. You were like, what, 26? 26? You were 25?
25.
25. So you were actually 25. Going into 26 when all this happened. So can you just kind of like tell the people about the journey that you were on and kind of what happened?
Yeah, I think it's always hard to start this because I don't really know where to start because I have a timeline, of course, of things that happen, but it's kind of like, where do you start? I think one of the things that we often talk about, we kind of start from our childhood on this podcast here. Yeah. So growing up, you know, I knew that death was a thing, that it was inevitable, that was going to happen. You get right with the Lord and you can make it to the Lamb's Book of Life, right? So, but beyond that, it wasn't really talked about. I've seen other people lose their aunts and their uncles, and I've lost cousins and aunts and uncles and people I wasn't close to, but I was not prepared to come to terms with the mortality of the people who raised me.
Right.
And so at 25, going into 26, about to become a wife, I came face to face with really being able to say, wow, this is my grandparents are going to go, my parents are going to go, you know, wow.
Yeah.
And so just to explain of the timeline there, I was getting married in April, and then in March, out of nowhere, actually, my grandmother had been sick on and off. She'd been in the hospital on and off, but there wasn't anything recent.
Yeah. So before you get into it, kind of like describe your family dynamic.
Oh, okay, yes.
So I think that would be helpful.
That's a good, thank you, Erin.
Yes, I was
have
like,
a
I
good
know the
dynamic.
story.
She does.
I know the story. I know who's who, but yeah, just for
yes, okay.
the story. Yeah.
So
Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. Thank you for that. Like I said, everything's kind of jumbled.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to know where to start. But of course, you want to be able to share all of this in hopes that it'll impact and help somebody else who might be going through this. So my parents divorced when I was 3. And so with that, I've always had a good family unit. You know, a lot of people, their parents get divorced and they don't have that solid ground. Both sets of my grandparents were in my life, my dad's parents and my mom's parents. I spent summers with my dad's parents, and then I spent like weekdays and school days with my mom's parents because they were close. They would pick me up from school. My dad's parents lived in East Texas, about an hour away, so they got me in the summers. And I truly attribute my mom and my grandparents for raising me into the person that I am today. And once again, yes, death was talked about, but it wasn't, I never lost anybody that close to me. In 2020, it was really kind of like 2019 going into 2020. You know, everybody's like, 2020 is my year. Yeah, this is going to be great. This was before the pandemic happened. My December 30th of 2019, my aunt actually passed away from stage 3 breast cancer. And so from that, I come from a very small family. This was my mom's sister. She only had one sister. She had one younger sister, and I called her TT. So TT and my mom, they each had one daughter. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That was the family unit. So it wasn't a lot of children to lean on.
Right.
So when she passed away, she had a 16-year-old daughter. We then had to uproot that 16-year-old and move her from Houston to Dallas, which was a crazy adjustment. And I went through a grieving period from there, but there was also a sense of guilt as well because, like, my cousin just lost her mother, the only parent that she ever knew, right. And I'm sitting here crying, boohooing, crying because my aunt's gone. It was also some guilt of being the older cousin and her being able to see me graduate high school and all of that. But through therapy, remember we always talk about Jesus and therapy on here.
Need both.
Through Jesus and therapy, I was able to kind of grieve through that and get through that. And I think one of the things that really helped me was that previously our founding pastor of our church had passed away from cancer. And to see the grace that his family handled that with, never losing their faith, I think that really helped me to be able to see that both sadness and faith can both coexist.
That's good. That's good stuff.
I think so. I think you have to pay attention to what's around you, your friends, your community, and see how they handle stuff. Not as far as like, ooh, I want to be like you, but just let me observe how they handle it and see if I can learn something from that. And so I think if the order of things hadn't happened that way, if he hadn't passed and then my aunt had passed, I would not have been able to see that. And I think that helped me further on to the journey. So moving back to, I was getting married in April. And my dad's mom, like I said, she had some health issues, but she's always gone to the hospital and come out. So it was a random Monday in March. I get a call from my dad's sister, my other aunt. And I'm like, hey, what's up? I have no idea what she was talking about because funny enough, we'd actually gotten into a disagreement because she didn't like the rules I had for my wedding. So we'd actually gotten into a disagreement. So I didn't know what she was calling me for. Yeah. And she says, hey, we're on our way to East Texas. I think your grandma's gone. I was like, gone? What are you talking about, gone? She was like, your grandpa said she couldn't he couldn't wake her up. Well, now let me pause here and say there have been plenty of close calls with my grandmother. She's gotten to the hospital, she's gotten some fluids or something, and she's been fine. Yeah. So that wasn't the freak out moment. Turns out they got to the hospital and they did pronounce her. They pronounced her at the hospital. And so a random Monday, I got to text my boss, hey, I'm done with work for today. I can't do this. Close the computer, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I just lost one of my 4 grandparents when I've had all 4 my entire life. And I think in that true moment, I was able to really recognize that not everybody has that.
Right.
Not everybody's been able to say that they've grown up with both sets of their grandparents all their life. And I know some people didn't really understand why I was so devastated. Because I did have some people I would share with them, yeah, my grandmother passed and I was sad about it. And they'd be like, at least it wasn't your parent.
I think I remember you telling me that. That's my said that. I don't think I said that, did I?
No, you
Okay,
were.
I was like, wait a minute, let me backtrack because we were just, again, we were, she was new to the job, we were becoming friends, and so I'm just like, did I say that? Like, let me go back.
No, but it was one of our coworkers.
Yeah.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
It was one of our coworkers. She said, well, it wasn't your parents, it was your grandparents, it was your parents, so you still have both of your parents, so everything's going to be okay.
But I think the key thing that you said is, not everybody has that dynamic. So, I'm looking at my own life, didn't know my father. My grandmother passed away when I was 2. And then my granddad, my mom's dad, passed away when my mom was 4. So, there was, I don't have any memory of, my grandmother, because I don't have memories, before 2 years old. And then my grandfather was gone for so long. So it was, I can say from being in that moment with you, I couldn't understand. I knew that it was sad. Of course, losing any family member is sad. But I could say for sure I didn't have that same kind of I don't know if it's empathy, sympathy, whichever one it is, because I didn't have that dynamic. So it was kind of different for me to see, but also with you explaining, these are people that raised me, I kind of got to see, okay, that makes sense. Because I think people think that grandparents are so far back, you see them on holidays and on the weekends, and that's it. It's just grandpas, it's grandma. But you saying no, these are people that actually were in my life, raised me to be who I am. They were so intentional. And so, I think that's the key part is not everybody has that dynamic with their grandparents, but you did.
Right. I think it's also good to put a pin in here and say, so on my mom's side, I am the oldest grandchild, period. And then on my dad's side, I am the oldest granddaughter. They have 2 grandsons, but I was the oldest granddaughter. And so I think that also kind of made a difference as well. And I was my daddy's daughter. It was the relationship between mothers and their sons. And then me being his daughter was something crazy. But I digress. Coming back to the story here. And in the midst of that, we had buried my grandmother. We'd had her service and everything, and of course I was torn up about it. During this time of this grieving process, I was like, I have no idea what to do with these emotions. I don't know what I'm doing, but the only thing that I can do is lean on my faith, because I know that that's there and it's unwavering, and everything else is uncertain, but I'm a faith this out. And that's when I really had found Ty Tribbett's song. What's it called? Is it called In the Morning? That's not what it's called.
Is it the Only One Night Though?
Yes.
Okay.
Only One Night Though.
Look at me knowing.
There you go. Look at you.
Look at me knowing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
One Night. So I had actually never heard that song.
I just don't listen to gospel like that. I
Look at you. Good job.
Yeah.
But I had actually never heard that song before. I liked Ty Tribbett's, but I wasn't in there. So I don't know if someone came on the radio, but Only One Night though came on, and it was his live album he did in Florida. Was it Florida? I think it was in Florida. All right, thank you. It was in Florida. It was a live album. Media Man knows. Shout out to the Media Man.
Shout out to T.
Yes. And so I'd really listened to that, and I was like crying on my way to work because I was like, weeping may endure for one night, and it's going to be only for one night, but we know that joy comes in the morning. And so through this process of the stress of me starting a new job, as you had mentioned, trying to finalize all the preparations for my wedding, because this was a month before my wedding, and also grieving the loss of my grandparent, I really had to fake this out. And that reminds me of when I was at church, and it was a sermon, and comes from 1 Samuel chapter 30 verses 8. And so, in that entirety story, we talked about how David is running from King Saul, and because King Saul is jealous of him because of all of the great work that he's done, and he's only been able to do these great works because he's been faithful to God. And one of the things that my pastor pointed out in this sermon was that, it's really easy to have faith and believe when you've been blessed your whole entire life. And looking back on my life, I have been incredibly blessed. And this is the first time that I've had to deal with loss like this. Yeah. And so to really keep my faith was very, very important. And for me to I had no idea what I was doing. I don't even remember some of those moments. But I do know that I was in my word, praying. Yeah. I had gospel on 24/7. I didn't listen to anything else because I needed the messages and I needed the word 24/7. And if I didn't have it on, I was just in silence. And so, I got married. That was hard because it kind of was a family divided there. My grandfather, he had been married to my grandmother for 54 years. And so he was like, I can't come to your wedding. I just can't. And of course I understood. At that time also, I think 2 weeks before we got married, my husband's cousin, his wife had lupus and she passed away. And then they had her funeral on our wedding, the same day of our wedding. So the family was split between supporting their nephew's son, cousin, and also supporting their other nephew, son, cousin. So we shared that with them. And then let's rewind back a week before, the week I got married. My mother's father was found face down in his yard. He had a severe stroke. And now, mind you, I'm still grieving over my grandmother. And now I had a full panic attack. And I called my aunt and I said, I need you to pray with me because I cannot lose another grandparent right now. I don't have the capacity or the strength to lose it. And you see, in previous episodes, we talked about how I don't have the best relationship with my father, but my grandfather, my mom's dad, was always there 24/7 and had an active role in raising me. Came to pick me up from school, taught me how to drive, taught me how to ride a bike, taught me how to climb a tree. He was supposed to walk me down the aisle. And so the man who was supposed to walk me down the aisle now is in the hospital, hospitalized with a severe stroke. So then my family further divided because somebody's got to stay with him. Somebody's got to sit with him in the hospital while the rest of them come to the wedding. And it was funny. This is one of these laugh to keep from crying moments. I looked at he was my fiance at the time. I looked at him and I said, listen, if these people didn't want to come to this wedding, all they had to do was RSVP no.
I remember, like, everything you're talking about, we had these conversations at the, the essay. And everything is like come back to my mind because I'm visual. So I remember all these conversations, and I think you said that I was like, are you kidding me?
But it was one of those moments where it's a laugh to keep from crying.
I was like, all right. Again, I didn't understand. So I'm like, if this is how she do, then okay. Like, I can't say nothing because I don't.
I was tired of tears.
Yeah.
I was so sick of crying. I was so sick of crying. So I was like, listen, if these people didn't want to come to this wedding, they could have just said no. They had to do all this.
Still don't really know how to respond to that, y'all.
And it wasn't.
I just let her have her moment. That's just what it is. I'm just like, okay.
It wasn't like I needed somebody to be like, oh, don't say that, or that's just how I felt at that moment. Yeah. All of this is surrounding what was supposed to be a very joyous time.
Right. How did he respond?
He was like, wow, Jazmin.
He was like, I don't say either.
Which is fine. You know, I wasn't expecting anybody to say anything, but that was just a moment that I needed to do, to just let it out and just laugh and just have that shock factor a little bit. But, you know, I was able, successfully got married. I guess I did. I guess I successfully got married.
You did good success. You got married. You successfully got married. I
successfully got married. And it was really hard for individuals to understand. Like, my mother-in-law would constantly ask me if I was excited about the wedding. Mm-hmm. You're excited? You're excited? You ready to go? Aren't you? You're excited to marry my son, aren't you? Ma'am, I have... my grandmother's gone, and my grandfather is hospitalized right now.
Right.
I got more on my mind than walking down the aisle with some flowers. And so that was always hard. And I think you have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to be able to understand where you are. And also, when you're in seasons like this, it's not going to be, everything's going to be still. Sometimes things are going to keep going. And you have to learn how to pivot and pursue and prevail. Because everything's not just going to be quiet and dark, and you can grieve in these quiet and dark moments. No, work still needs you to do some things. At that point, I still had to make some decisions about weddings and finalized payments and rehearsals and all that type of stuff. And so that also taught me some strength, taught me to be strong, things like that. So moving forward, we got successfully married. I think I've kind of gone through that process of grieving my grandmother, and then 9 months later, my grandfather passed away, the one who buried his wife. 9 months later, my dad's father passed away from a broken heart. They were married for 54 years, and he just, oh my gosh, and part of me was a little surprised because growing up, they fought like cats and dogs. Oh, they bickered and went after each other, but that's just how they loved. At the end of the day, if she needed to go somewhere, he'd gripe about it, but he'd get in the car. You know, if she needed to go to her doctor's appointments, he'd gripe about it, but he'd get in the car. He'd take her wherever she needed to go and do anything he needed to do for her. And so to not have that, and not have her and her presence available, it was just too much for him to take. So 9 months later, I was in the same little church where we had my grandmother's service for my grandfather. Hers was all pink because that's the color she was going to wear to my wedding. And his was Cowboys themed because he loved his boys. He loved them boys. And I'm not going to lie, I couldn't hold it together at all to have to be in the same place that you were 9 months earlier. Was extremely hard. And one of the things that I always appreciated about both sides of my family was, even though my parents got divorced, they didn't have animosity with each other. They didn't choose sides. They were just like, the marriage didn't work out. They had a child. It's okay. So my mom's side of the family, my mom came to the funeral. My mom came to both funerals. My grandmother showed up to both funerals. Some of my cousins on my mom's side showed up to one or the other funeral. My in-laws showed up to my grandfather's funeral. So I appreciated the amount of support and community from that. I hated that it was during my Christmas break, though, because...
Oh, my gosh.
I was on Christmas break.
Paying back to her because I don't know what to say.
But it is what it is. And so my grandfather who had the stroke, he's doing okay, but it's definitely been a challenge. There has been a lot of change in our family, and we kind of have to figure out how we can continue to be caregivers, because it's a lifelong thing. He's gotten so much better. He can walk now. He walks with a cane now, which is great. It's been a year since all of this has happened, so he's making a good recovery. But we have to always remind him that he can't move. He can't do as much as he did before. And so it's something about grieving, not only grieving the loss, like as in you've had to go to a funeral for them, but also grieving the loss of the individual. So my grandfather has always been that protector and that provider and the person that taught me things and the person that always told me to save money. And now to grieve the person that he was, the person who helped raise me, and accept who he is now. He's still all of those amazing things. He still has his comedic side, that he's still funny. He makes all the nurses laugh everywhere he goes. Hospital staff loves him. But also knowing that he's going to need some more help with things, or there's going to be some things that he's not going to be able to do. His medications are different. So really being able to lean into that. But going back to the sermon that I was talking about a little bit earlier, there are some things that I wanted to touch on that. So in the passage, the beginning of chapter 30 outlines the loss David experiences after having so many wins as he's following God, right? And so trying to do the best you can with the hand that you're dealt with can still feel like it's not enough, of course. And then so with that, David had some soldiers who were along with him. They lost things as well. And in the Bible, it says that they wept so much that they could not weep anymore. And I felt like that's where I was at that moment. That's why I made those jokes or those shock values, because I could not weep. I had nothing left as far as crying and being sad and wrapping myself up in a ball and not wanting to be there. But some points that my pastor shared in this passage that I thought were like very, very important, some things that I wanted to highlight as we're having this conversation and I'm telling this story, is that some ways that you can continue the healing and continue your faith while you're going through this period of loss. And loss doesn't just mean grieving the death of somebody. It could be the loss of a job or loss of career or a loss of a life that you thought you were going to have at a certain age. Hashtag big 25. But, we all know that loss is unavoidable. We have to think about how we're going to respond when that loss comes, in whatever form that it comes. And so one of the things is he talked about that great loss should push you into intimate prayer. And so I reflected on that when that was shared in the sermon. I reflected on that as that was the only thing that I felt like I could turn to in my enormous amount of grief. I knew that I had God and God had me. And so for me to be able to lean into that a little bit more was so great. Another thing is knowing that you have to move forward without anyone around you. So loss is not meant to paralyze you. So as I was talking about how you had all of these things happening, I still had to make decisions about my wedding. I still had to go to work. I still had to finalize some things. And so to be able to have those two areas of loss is happening, I'm grieving, but I'm also working to being a better person, or working to shaking off of that to know where I can have that living loss where you're still sad. Of course, I still miss my grandmother every day and my grandfather every day, but still being able to keep going, because I know that they wouldn't want me to just crawl under this table or something. Right. And then the last one, not limiting your pursuit. And so, God promises you things. Read your Bible, you can see all the promises that God makes to you as us, as his people. And so he doesn't give a time frame, right? So, you're in your pursuit for these things, you're in your pursuit for this goal, you're working toward these things, you're keep moving, you're keeping moving. And it's not always next week, next year, tomorrow. I mean, I still have these moments. There is this one gospel song that my grandmother loved. And whenever it comes on my playlist, I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking about the Cowboys are playing. Oh, what would Grandpa have thought about this game?
Yeah.
And so that makes me sad, but I also know that they're not in pain and they're okay.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that pursuit, whatever goal, you have to make sure that you focus on that and you keep moving forward, and don't make it in your time frame. It's always in God's time frame, and whatever that looks like is whatever it looks like. And I am done.
That's
the
good.
end.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you for, your transparency and just being able to share that story.
I didn't cry, y'all.
You didn't.
Ooh.
You didn't. Come on, growth. We're talking about healing on this podcast. So definitely a journey. And it may be another moment. I think they said grief comes and what's the word? What did they say? Grief comes in.
Is it threes or ups and downs? Waves.
Right. Okay.
I like waves.
Okay.
Waves sounds good.
Yeah. So grief comes in waves. So, maybe, today may be great, but there may be tomorrow that's hard. And so it comes and goes. It comes in different shapes and forms. Yeah. And so, thank you again for being able to share your story. And I think one of the things that kind of really stuck out with your story is a scripture that I would like to share.
Let's do this.
It's Psalm 34:18, which says, "The Lord is near the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." And so throughout your story, I just kind of heard of the supportive family, of the grief, the grieving process. But I think, the big message or the big takeaway that I got from that is just how you were able to lean into the Lord, and you were able to press into Him. And I think in that you may have gotten to know Him as a father and a comforter. Yes. And so I think with that, and even I think that may be also just a part of the memory of your grandparents, is just that, they may have comforted and loved you with the Lord's love. And so He was able to do that for you in that. So if you may not have had them to comfort you in love in that moment because they are gone away, He then stepped in and He was that. So He may have given you in the physical form them to comfort you, but then He also comforted you with His Spirit. And so I think that is amazing. And definitely something that hopefully will encourage you all as well. We don't know what loss that you're experiencing. Like you said, it may be the loss of a loved one, it may be a loss of a job or a life that you thought that you would live. But the Lord is, like the scripture said, the Lord is near the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And so hopefully Jazmin's story really encouraged you, and really just calls you to lean into the Lord with your loss that you have. And so knowing Him as a comforting, loving Father is a really big thing. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. Anything else you want to say? Anything else?
I want to say thank you guys for listening to my story. Yeah. It's always great to share. See, now I'm gonna cry.
We have the tissue on standby. Yeah.
It's always great to be able to be vulnerable in hopes that you can help others for whatever you guys are going through. And my hope for you and my prayer for you is that you take what's being shared in this podcast and move forward. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Yeah,
I'm done.
And it's people, and I'll say this will be my last thing. So just watching you speak on this, of the Lord being able to use you, and the Spirit being in you and speaking through you too, to be able to share your story and to be able to encourage others. I definitely saw that too, in this. And so I think the Spirit of the Lord gave you strength to share. And so again, just thank you. Thank y'all.
Okay, bye.